Hello, and welcome to the People's AI, presented by Vana. Today, we are speaking to two of the geniuses who are building AI agents, and specifically blockchain-fueled AI agents. I'm your host, Jeff Wilser, and I'm proud to partner with Vana to make this podcast a reality. Vana is a network for user-owned data. That helps create user-owned AI, and Vana is building the world's first open protocol for data sovereignty. More broadly, Vana embodies the ethos and is helping to build the ecosystem for decentralized AI and the people's AI. And as anyone who has followed decentralized AI knows, or even AI at large, the world of AI agents is all the rage. I happen to be dropping this episode during the ETH Denver conference. And it seems like almost every event is all about AI agents, and specifically the intersection of AI agents and crypto. There are AI agents panels. I'm moderating a few of those. AI agents networking events, an entire AI agents day, and the Near project has an entire slate of programming called The Road to 1 Trillion Agents. And two of the smartest people speaking on AI agents at ETH Denver are the two very guests on this podcast. That would be David Crapis, the co-founder of Pin AI, and David Minarsch, co-founder of Valory. Now, to state the obvious, yes, I know the names David and David might sound a touch confusing, but happily, David Minarsch is calling from London, and his accent removes any ambiguity. You will follow along, don't worry. So we cover a ton of ground in this very quickly evolving AI agent space. We start with a lay of the land of what current use cases excite them, and it's more than just AI agents trading meme coins. We talk about how the very model or dynamic of AI agents could be very different than people think. So it's not just an AI agent that does the bidding of humans, but also potentially humans who do the bidding of AI agents. And of course, AI agents that coordinate and control teams of sub-agents, if you will. And all of this, of course, could be elegantly orchestrated thanks to the wizardry of blockchain and smart contracts, which is why so many are bullish on the overlap of AI agents and crypto. The core thesis is that many of these AI agents will need to spend money. So what better way for a digitally native entity, AI, to spend money than using a digitally native currency? When I first wrote about this trend for CoinDesk nearly 2 years ago, as someone in the space shared with me, the irony is the first real, true, mainstream use case of people spending cryptocurrency, like for transactions to do things, might not actually be people, might not be humans, but instead AI. Perhaps soon we'll have millions or billions or hell, trillions of AI agents flinging cryptocurrency at each other, creating this truly fluid and frictionless AI agentic economy. So what would that mean for society? What will it take to get there? What are the technical obstacles we have to overcome? If AI and meme coins is a starting point, where is all of us headed? What's the North Star? David, and I get into all of that, as well as how and why DeepSeek has been a game changer. We get into predictions for the future and cover some real nuance that's often lost in the headlines or the X timelines. I think anyone with even a passing interest in AI agents will get a ton out of this episode. So for now, please enjoy my conversation with David Minarsch, co-founder of Valory, and David Crapis, the co-founder of Pin AI. David, welcome to the People's AI podcast.
Hi, I'm David. I'm one of the co-founders of Pin AI, which we started about a year ago. It's a very ambitious project. What we're building is the first personal AI network. And our mission is to keep humans at the center of the AI revolution. Mm-hmm. And the way that you can understand personal AI is that there is two key components. One is personal data, and the other one is the personal AI model itself. So we are building a network where like we allow people to securely reclaim their data from like Web2 services and digital services and feed it to their personal AI, and then use the personal AI to connect them to like as a gateway to the web of agents that is emerging.
It's a very small, modest project, a very narrow scope you guys are building. Exactly. I want to go into way more detail and nuance in a bit. David M., sir, give the listeners a bit of a sense of what you're building, your North Star with Valory and OLAS.
Yeah, hey, great to be here as well. I'm David, co-founder and CEO of Valory, which is a core contributor to OLAS. At OLAS, we're also focused on agents that users can own. We often refer to co-owned AI or co-owned agents. We believe there's a demand for that and see that demand where users really want to take ownership of the agents. And as we already heard, the data which is associated with them. And we also see that there's a big opportunity where you can have effectively entire economies made up of these agents. So one thing which we're particularly focused on and OLAS is like we see these agents that user own to be achieving end user goals for their users by relying on other agents that other users or other businesses might own. So it's this idea of agent economies or web of agents where agents autonomously, trade with each other and kind of exchange information and other goods to get valuable things done for their user. And that's where we focus on. And OLAS, just to give you some sense of numbers, the agents on OLAS have done over 4 million transactions. Over 2 million of them are agent-to-agent transactions, so where the agents autonomously trade with each other. And our use cases currently span from prediction markets to DeFi to more kind of social character agents.
One reason I was so excited to speak to both of you is you're both building projects that are actually live in the wilds. It's happening right now. This is no longer just in the whiteboard stage. And we are getting, and I'm sure you guys every day, every week, you're having new insights. Holy shit, I didn't envision this happening, or I can't believe they're doing this. David, what excites you most about the intersection of AI agents and crypto right now? What would you say is actually working in the space beyond just the hype? What are the most exciting developments in the past few months?
So I think it's an exercise that we need to do to filter the signal from the noise. Right? It's actually a funny story. About a year ago, I wrote a blog post called The Internet of Agents. And David was actually one of the early reviewers. And I thanked him in the post. He was giving me feedback. And I was actually talking a lot about verified trust models for agents. And then very concrete use cases. Some of them, OLAS has been spearheading using agents in info finance, prediction markets, in DeFi, and kind of evolution of that. The reality is that then in the 8 to 10 months after that, we've seen basically something completely different, which is this social agent use case that has emerged as a use case, but then all the kind of speculation on top of it and the meme coin.
And just to clarify for our listeners, so imagine the example we're referring to most infamously or famously is the terminal of truth, right? Or the Goatee Maximus would be an example of, what's the best term for this? Social meme agents. That's and again, it's very complicated. Is it actually an agent or a semi-autonomous agent? And did they actually create the meme coin or encourage others to? But is that an example of what you're referring to?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was referring to as social agents. Yeah, we should make clear that's only one very narrow use cases that maybe it's been overblown, but actually that specific use case is quite interesting. So this.
Oh, it's fascinating. It is. Yeah. And also for disclosure, I've interviewed Andy Airy, the creator, multiple times. I card table. I think he's smart, sharp, great guy. I find the project enthralling. So, but it's very complicated in a million different directions. So go on.
Yeah, and it's a real experiment on AI first, on what these AIs can do. Actually, it was not a crypto project in the beginning.
Yep.
Right. And if you want, is also an example of something that finds some type of product market fit in crypto. Someone attached a token to this agent, and then they created this new category of financialized social agents. So I think that's interesting, but we need to scale it down. And as you were saying, zoom out and see it as one use case. Right? Then I think on the more concrete use cases of agents, what I'm excited about is info finance is a big one. The experiments that David can tell more what they're doing with prediction market
Mhm.
And in general, using the blockchain for what is really good for coordinating AI, payments, stablecoin payments, like this idea of an economy between agents is one. And the other one is trust and security. So right now, as you were alluding to, like the initial versions of like even these social agents, you don't know if they are really autonomous or if the dev is controlling them like behind the curtain. Now there is recent experiments with like, putting agents in TE. I don't know if you've seen Freza or like some other experiments. Like there is more and more of that. And we are also like, we have a TE network that initially we built for the PinAI data connector. So we want people to be able to essentially reclaim their data in an autonomous, automatic way, but without intermediary. So we use like these services deployed in TE network, but we also like starting to experiment how to use that to have some agents in the cloud that they have like similar security property to your personal AI on your phone. So I think we'll see more of that. So to summarize, I'm excited about agents on chain that use it for what it's good for, which is coordination and trust security.
David, how about you? What makes you most fired up about where we are? And maybe what in the past few months has the most surprised you as far as evolution?
Maybe on the surprise side, more on the AI side, R1 and the reasoning models. I think that surprised me how fast it now went.
Yep.
In terms of the space, like I've been in the space for quite some time, building agents 6 years before anyone even talked about agents. And initially we didn't have large language models, and then later they came and really changed the game of what you can do. But like large language models, usable ones, are here since like over 3 years now. And it still took a while for there to really be like this moment where I guess there's a broader acceptance in crypto that agents might be a thing. I still remember a year ago, people started believing it, but they still were a bit confused or didn't really connect
It seems
to it.
so fanciful. A year ago,
Exactly.
I wrote about this a year ago, and it seemed, oh, sure, maybe someday pie in the
Right.
sky idea.
And then I think, as so often, you don't know what cuts through to a given consumer, right? Any one of us, like when we think about a piece of technology, we need some sort of experience which makes it real for us. And I think what happened in the recent months is that now everyone has a sense of what an agent can be. And as Davide was saying, it's also just one thing, like what an agent is. So there's all these other use cases that also can be. And so that's the flip side of it. Like people over-index maybe a lot on the current use cases now and lose the forest for the trees. But it's exciting that finally, I think it's no longer a question that AI agents in crypto can be a thing. It's more like, okay, what's next and how will this evolve? And that's what we're very excited about. And I think to specifically, obviously, the way it went about in hindsight, I mean, it's 2020, but you can see why it came with this, because it's the typical sort of speculative thing which could happen on these meme coin social agents, right? Like crypto always needs this kind of very speculative
It almost
element.
had to be that way. When you think
Exactly,
about it,
right.
in the world of crypto, it always starts with speculation
Right.
and like weird shit. That's where things begin. And the hope is that's the on-ramp to get people excited. Like, ooh, this might moon eventually. And there's an inevitable come down from that.
Exactly.
And there might be egg on our faces, largely speaking in the industry. But eventually we see substance and real use cases. Do you see it shaking out that way as well? Like the speculation comes first, then the substance comes?
Yeah, it's a hype cycle. Like exactly. And I think what's interesting with the use cases we saw now, it's often a sort of quite centralized way. So there's some dev team somewhere running this agent where we don't even know if it's LARPing an agent or if it's actually an agent. And and then there's this very detached coin. And the two things are actually not like technologically linked. Like maybe the agent holds a little bit in its wallet, or maybe the dev team says that they're somehow linked, but there's no technological link. And that's quite interesting that it came about this way, but it's also like the lowest friction path in which it came about.
Yeah.
I think what we'll see now is more this kind of picking apart of the use cases. So there's these user-owned agent, like where Ola's focus on. There's the more sort of agents as a service, like where there's a singular entity, the agent running somewhere like an AI XPT that offers a service to other agents or other humans, maybe has or hasn't got a top coin attached to it. So it's definitely now like splintering up, and that's exciting.
Absolutely. And I think if Andy Ari were here, I think he might say, I've spoken to him multiple times. I've written about I've had him in my other podcast, AI Curious. I think he would say that it was never intended and it never presented as, yes, here are some purely 100% AI driven entity that is on its own this meme coin, but rather this AI entity that still has some human assistance in doing the mechanics of posting and stuff on Twitter X, but ultimately put something out there in the universe / crypto Twitter that the Twitter interacted with and together created this kind of coin out of nothing. So David, you on kind of getting to like the idea of what's next. So we're starting with like the fun meme coin stuff, but ultimately that's not the end game. That's not the North Star. On X, you recently posted a graph of, it's still early, eventually on the kind of timeline, it showed like the left was ChatGPT launches, work somewhere here. And then to the far right is billions of AI agents at your service. What will it take to get there, David? In other words, like mass adoption. Like what's the biggest kind of technical or economic or cultural roadblocks that have to be overcome to get to that kind of billions of agents reality?
Maybe I should preface that I have no crystal ball. So I've done predictions, but have been wrong before. I think one very interesting angle is related to this last thing you were mentioning around how these AIs start creating relationships with humans. And you were thinking about, we've been discussing so far, even in this podcast, around agents serving humans. I think that's a first type of relationship that like we're really focused on initially. But then there is also this other one where agents can also cause some activity in humans. There is also some examples of some of the virtual agents that like actually try to pay people to do work for them.
Can you elaborate a little more on what's possible already today in that framework?
Yeah, essentially, I think it's this notion of maybe sovereign agents, which still like today we should take it with some caveats because these are not like fully autonomous. But if you have an agent service and like it has a wallet that it can control and you can do this provably in a TE. I think the early experiments were not like really set up in like fully legit way, but like they have this experiment where there is these social agents on the virtual protocol called Luna and a few others. So Luna is a wallet. It's a small wallet that the developer gives some funds and it can use it to achieve its goals, right? So the agent has like a planning loop. It has like high level goal and then sub goals. And then one example is that it paid another agent to produce some images. So the other one was like kind of a generative agent so that it can post and get more followers. The goal of this agent is to get more followers. And then it was paying like some humans to like retweet their post. Very small example, but it relates to like creating this relationship that is not just one way.
The idea that you're having because almost by definition, an agent is an entity, I'm making this up, that does something on behalf of someone else. Sorry, it's a different world. I'm a book author. I have book agents. The book agents helps me sell books. He gets my book deal done. So to your point, David, this is flipping that relationship, right? If an AI agent is typically think of as, hey, go buy my plane tickets to go to Tokyo next week. Here's the budget I have, find me the best flights. But you're saying the AI agent is actually employing a human potentially to do things. So the idea of having agents have humans as their agents and also having other AI agents as their agents creates this really complicated economy and framework that I don't think anyone's quite figured. I mean, obviously people are working on it, but I think it's still a TBD on exactly how it's all going to shake out.
I think basically that road, the billions of agents is really, it's not one application, right? Like all web applications are going to get wrapped into some agentic service. This is already happening, right? Like in Web 2, there is a parallel hype cycle where all the services and the traditional SaaS, now it's becoming agentic. And there is agents around coding, security, customer success, sales, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So this is like one thing that is happening. But then I think the vision, the end game that like I can see is like when it's not just one application, but it's like all this economic activity of agents that are more similar to web service or more similar to some sovereign agent with its own goals. And there is economic relation between them and humans. And I think the main question there is, where are the humans in this economy? Are we just serving the AIs, or do we have a role of governing them, and maybe like they make our life better because we elevate ourselves and maintain like some governance?
David, I do want to eventually explore that wild world of as David says, the where are the humans scenario that we might get to. But what do you think it will take to get, in your minds, what's the most likely roadmap to get to billions of agents? And then maybe a adjacent question to that is, what do you think will be the killer app, or if you will, the use case? What will make this truly go mainstream? What's the concrete application that an AI agents will do? So even the normies, the folks who never heard of Denver or DevCon, they're like, oh my God, this makes my life easier. I want to do this.
Yeah, I mean, equally, I don't have the crystal ball, but I think firstly, like, this term agent is a bit loaded. So when we're like talking about agent from economic point of view, it's as simple as a wallet can be an agent, or like some microservice can be an agent, right? Or whatever. And then all the way to something more with autonomy and sovereignty and its own goals, and maybe one day even being sentient or whatever. It's such a broad term. So I think like depending how you count, we already have a billion agent, but that's not the kind of agent we're meaning here, right? And so I think like one type of agents we'll see are these sort of agents that are effectively businesses and service providers, like the AI expertise in crypto, like some sort of influencer agent on already exists on various social platforms where it's clearly not humans. It's just like AI generated content. Obviously some humans in the background somewhere. We mentioned virtuals, we mentioned other social agent platforms where this exists. And then on the other end of the spectrum, the kind of agents users own, like the Pin AI agent, you'll have your own Pin AI agent, you have your own OLAS agent already where you can delegate it to your wallet and it will trade in DeFi, or you can delegate it to your wallet and it will trade in prediction markets. They have very different implications for scale as well. And what I think we're still a little bit away from is this idea where every user has several personal agents. Like certainly that's where we're very focused on with OLAS and Pin AIs as well. The idea being you have 1 to n agents in different verticals initially. Maybe one day it collapses into a single agent that is just all powerful and doing various personal things for you broadly around health, wealth, and well-being. And then they, in order to get stuff done, need to tap into other agents. And that's for multiple reasons. If you think about it from a pure sort of software point of view, different models have different strengths, and agents build basically software on top of models. If you want, certain models are maybe better for coding, others are maybe better for something like predicting the future, like in Predict, others are maybe fine-tuned to a DeFi use case. And then you have like different taste as well, like humans. If you think about social, right? Like for instance, Sentient is a partner we're working with. We have this agents.fun protocol where there's these character agents, and sometimes you intentionally want them to have a certain persona around like the way they talk. So you might want to have a different model again. So that's to say that there's this whole, I think, diversity assumption baked in, and like decentralization assumption baked into like agents at scale. Like it's for me very hard to see how we get to like billions and billions of agents where effectively all of them are an instance of an open AI model, because that would collapse the mode of like economic interaction and social interactions into a very narrow design space and economic sphere. Like it seems unlikely to me. So whilst I don't know exactly what happens in which order, I do think that we'll see much more like heterogeneity in the kind of agents and the kind of architectures, and that they will plug into each other. Like historically we had the microservices via APIs sort of being permission to plug your like backend into some other company's backend to get stuff done. I think what we'll be seeing more is that this is done via more sort of agentic interfaces. And I suspect that crypto is a natural rails for that. I mean, we are heavily using it on OLAS, but in the grand scheme of things, OLAS is small. And like what we're seeing there is just a real benefit. You can give a user a software agent, right? They can download it. It's just software, and then they can fund it with their own crypto, and then they're off to the races. Contrast that with a situation where a user needs to sign up on various platforms, get various API keys, needs to fund them with their bank account. It's much, much more friction. So I think these points, it's been quite a few points, but I think they paint some picture that there is a route for crypto to be like one of those areas where we see more user-owned and heterogeneous agent and heterogeneous use cases emerge. And then there's obviously also this kind of trade element, and exactly how that checks out, I'm not sure.
No, I think it's a great segue. It's well put and a great segue into what you guys are both building, because you're both in different ways, literally building this ecosystem that we're describing and necessary to get to these billion agents. Congrats on the recent launch. Talk a little more about what you're building, how blockchain fits into it, why that's necessary. And then also, I'd love to hear a little more about the God model, as you call it. I think it's brilliant branding on your part. And then also maybe what has surprised you in the past as you've been rolling out, as in the wilds? What are you seeing that's giving you like new light bulbs, and what are kind of some of your early insights and takeaways from the launch so far?
So I start from like the personal AI angle. As I mentioned before, we are really focused on personal AI, and this is like a user-owned model on user device. Like the way you can imagine it right now and the way we are building it is, if you were to summarize in one function what this thing is like an executive assistant, right? It's not expert in any like specific task, but it can do basically three things really well. Has like a lot of context on like user personal data. It can call some APIs that we fine tune. Some of them are related to the protocol we're building. And then the third one is privacy. It knows like what data is PII that should not be shared with services that are not.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a little more about the kind of like at a very basic level? What are some use cases? Normie, what are some things that can do on their phone? You mentioned kind of executive assistants. What are some like basic functions it can do out of the gate already?
Yeah. So initially we are really focused on like the data part, because essentially the way you think about this personal assistant is right now in our app, there is a few initial use cases. We are building integration, for example, with Byte Agent from Virtuals, which is like basically a wrapper around like food ordering services, and like a few other use cases around travel planning, social entertainment. But the reality is that the personal AI is still not capable enough to actually like know you like so well to orchestrate all these kind of real activities for you. I don't know if you've tried Apple Intelligence.
We're a ways off. I think
it's not there yet. And the main problem from our perspective is like the data context is very limited, right? So yeah, Apple has a lot of access to their own product if you use them, but it has zero context on all the other hundreds and thousands of services that you use. Our focus at the first stage, you shouldn't expect that like you open the app and you have this assistant that autonomously does things for you and you just sit back. It's basically, we have this data connector protocol, which allows you to start reclaiming your data. And we also have some incentives to essentially like enable people to grow their personal AI, right? And I think this is where the God model comes into play. Essentially, our network has two types of nodes. One is data connector nodes, which is like the first step where like the human like very seamlessly, and we really worked a lot on the UX here, starts connecting like Web 2 services, and this data starts streaming, we compress it and save it on your phone. And then once the personal AI has access to this context, the other thing is like this personal AI should be capable, right? It should be able to use this data to send like a food order for you, or help you like plan some activity, or like trade in some prediction market for an issue that you care about. So what the God model does, so the God model is basically the best personal AI coach. So it's there to evaluate and then incentivize the personal AI to grow and improve its capabilities.
Thank you. And I want to get back to that in a moment. David, tell us a little more about what you're building and its recent focus and recent updates and what you guys have coming down the pipeline.
Yeah. So we focus very much at the moment on use cases where the agent is narrow by design, and the free ones which you can very easily use on a desktop app called Pearl one is a prediction market use case, one is a DeFi use case, and one is a character or social agent use case. And I can pick them apart now. The most recent one we launched was this DeFi use case. It's currently deployed on Mode. The ambition is to ultimately have it cross-chain and on all major chains, where effectively you delegate as a user to the agent some funds. It's up to you how much. And then the other thing you delegate to the agent is a goal. You can express that in natural language. That's the ambition. And then the agent will basically, after consulting you on, basically will suggest a strategy. And after consulting that you're okay with this, will henceforth autonomously execute that. So currently what it supports are mostly LP and other yield opportunities with lending protocols, either LPing in a DEX or offering liquidity to a lending protocol. But yeah, we're adding new opportunities basically into this agent's toolbox. So it's a bit like Davide was saying, like you have the agent that has these these goals and these capabilities to autonomously execute them. But at the end of the day, it relies on a set of tools or connectors to do that. And that's how that is architected.
I love that you guys, and one reason I was so excited for this particular pairing is one of your projects is extremely broad and wide in ambition as far as use cases and personal AI, and the other, and obviously in both projects, enormously challenging. And there's no low-hanging fruit here, no easy stakes. And David, the more narrow, yours focus for now, at least the more narrow trading perspective. I'm curious, do you have any sense yet of how good these AI agents are at both trading and predictions? Let's paraphrase the famous Warren Buffett's kind of argument that it's almost impossible to beat the markets, that you're better off putting money in S&P 500 than you were trying to pick stocks. Do we have a sense of whether AI agents are better than the market or better than humans? What have you seen so far?
Yeah, so on the DeFi side, I don't have any hard data yet. We launched the product a couple of weeks ago. The way I think about evaluation, and also obviously based on the user feedback, it's not purely about, obviously you want your agent to have decent returns, but it's also about like the UX versus having to do those things yourself.
Sure.
Like the aim with the product here is very much to offload a lot of the drudgery of even engaging with these products to an agent. So I'm very sure that high-skilled DeFi connoisseur can outperform the agent for quite some time on the DeFi side because they might be more tapped in, have access to edge opportunities, which the agent isn't even whitelisted for and so on. But that's not really the user problem we're solving here. We're solving the problem where the user wouldn't actually do this thing because it's too much labor for them. So here they delegate that task to the agent.
It's almost like they might have a strategy like, oh, I think that if a particular asset is overbought or oversold, and I'm going to define overbought as having a RSI of a certain level, or if it's below or above the 20-day moving average, something like that. So the human describes a trading
So this is on the
strategy.
long strategy for certain assets. On the
Yeah.
LPing side and like lending side, it's even as simple as saying, okay, well, there's 10 yield opportunities on a given chain, and then there's much more once you look at this from a cross-chain perspective. And I could theoretically move my assets around to this other one with slightly higher APY, but the effort of manually doing it and doing that instead of the 100 other things I've got to do today, I'm just not going to do it. And in this case, having an agent actually autonomously manage your portfolio is the appeal here as well. I want to come to the prediction markets quickly because we do have more data there.
Yeah.
That's been running for quite some time. And what we can say is that obviously on the ROI level, our objective is that the 50th percentile agent makes money, which basically means that on average, like agent society performs well. And we hit that most weeks, but there's some weeks where we dip below that on the population level for the agents. What's also pretty clear, although we don't have a hard scientific study yet, but it's from our own internal data, that the agents tend to be better at predicting the future than the humans. And we're talking here about markets with public information where basically what really matters is that you have a decent world model about the future state of the world rather than having access to some privy information about like some private information. We also have an interesting opportunity, which we're looking ahead because you were also asking about this. A lot of the agents and the models, it's not purely about just shipping like something that works today, right? It's more about like, how can I ship something that has a flywheel that makes it better tomorrow?
Yeah.
And so what's interesting with this prediction market is it really inherently has that flywheel. We're increasingly working with teams to see how can we mold that into almost like an eval for large language models and other kind of agentic systems, like a way to basically see, how your agent is performing against a given task. And then the output of specifically the prediction markets, and that's a bit more like futuristic at the moment. But the idea we have here really is that we want to have very reliable long-tail prediction markets where humans would never engage in. Like prediction markets on poly market where like a human is excited.
What's example? Yeah, what's an example where AI?
Yeah, like poly market are the sort of, it's a platform which mostly built for humans right now. Obviously, agents can also engage with it, but most of the markets you find there are markets where humans get excited to bet on them, right? And
elections,
elections, sports, whatever.
Yeah.
But if you think about the agentic web or the future of billions of agents, well, these agents are systems that also at points in time, in order to make decisions, need to rely on information that is forward-looking. And I, as an agent, can obviously use my model or my knowledge base to make that prediction and then have it feature in my decision-making. But contrast that with a situation where I, as an agent, can open programmatically a cheap prediction market to basically crowdsource some information about that from a pool of agents. That's almost like asking 100 models or however many models rather than one model. So this is a sort of more long-term view we have with these, is that these agents are very well served to serve prediction markets where humans wouldn't engage in. And then these prediction markets can become input for decision-making of agents and humans.
Interesting. David, you use the word futuristic. I want to use that as our segue as we wind down here. David, two-part question for you. Talk a bit about, on a more kind of pragmatic level, about Pin AI, where you see that headed in the next, let's go 1 to 5 years, as far as how could the world, in your minds, how could that world look different with Pin AI mass adoption? And then I'm going to ask you more broadly question. Give us kind of the wildest, but still plausible AI crypto use case that hasn't quite been built yet. But let's start with Pin AI.
Cool. I'll maybe talk to 6 months to 1 year, which is already like
and I know there's no crystal ball. I know our AI agents might have crystal balls, but we don't. I get it.
Oh, the reason I want to focus on 6 months to 1 year is not that I'm like kind of risk averse in making prediction, is that like the space is moving so fast.
Yes.
And actually, like with open source AI, we ride on this horse, which is open source AI, right? Like we are complementary to like all the developments that we are seeing in open source AI. David mentioned like DeepSeek R1. Like for us, for Pin AI has been a game changer, right? Because we really want like small models that can work on phones. And like R1, the small version, like the 1.5B distilled one, is a game changer, is like orders of magnitude more capable than 1 month ago.
Wow.
What we were able to do 1 month ago. So we already fine-tuned that. So I can imagine that at this pace, like already in 6 months to 1 year, capabilities is going to be like much broader on the AI side. Mm-hmm. And then on the crypto open protocol side, we are seeing like more people, like this is something that I'm really seeing people like starts understanding, maybe with the market cool off in the past month. They start understanding that like pure meme is not viable in the future. Many people are talking more about utility, like similar questions to what you are asking, Jeff, right? Okay, but what can these things actually do? So like in 6 months to 1 year, I can clearly see that you have a personal AI that like, when you ask me again in 6 months, okay, what can this personal AI do? I can give you like maybe 20 concrete use cases and numbers of like how people are using this. And the other one is that the personal AI is going to be capable, but it's not doing everything for you. It can connect to all us. It can connect to other agent protocols and outsource like some work. So I can already see that like in 6 months to 1 year, we'll start having many different agent services that your personal AI can call.
David, how about you? Give us a narrow prediction for your projects in the next 6 months to a year or so, and then kind of a broader prediction on the crypto AI space.
Yeah, sure. So we just 2 weeks ago launched an evolution of this desktop app where you can consume our agents in. And it went from being scoped to a single agent, a prediction agent, to now being more like an app store of agents. And that's something which we're pushing forward. And so we have a whole accelerator program now where people are going through already. I think we're making an announcement for the first team publicly tomorrow. And basically what we see here happening is that more and more agents come into this app, and that allows us to see what works and what doesn't. where I agree with Davide is there's been a lot of attention to the space, but a lot of it goes into just hot air because ultimately you need builders. You don't need to just have investors, right? You need people actually building useful applications. And I think crypto is often a bit ahead of that. And then on the other side, which I guess, represented here in terms of what Olas is doing, is we are having this agent-to-agent trade already. All our use cases depend on agents leveraging other agents. And on that level, we're launching something big next week that makes it easier for other protocols to plug into us and vice versa. So it does speak to how do you help different agent ecosystems bridge with each other. I do think still, like my sense is a lot of these agent projects are built very inwards, like they function as a sort of single thing and you can't really talk to them, like other than on maybe like XAPT on X and like whatever else, other agent system somewhere else. But there's not like a common language. So I agree on that point. Actually, interestingly enough, I have a background in multi-agent systems. This is a well-studied topic, and this has been like a point of concern for a long time. And so I'm also a bit skeptical that we'll just see a standard pop up and everyone rallies around the standard. Right. I doubt that's going to happen like this. And the interesting thing with agents, the better the models become, the less of a standard you need, right? Because really what you need at some point is just a wallet. And I think that sometimes
we'll figure it out. Like in theory, like
I mean,
same way with large language models with the transformer breakthrough, you actually have to say, this is a cat, this is a dog. You just fed all this data, figure it out. So in theory,
right,
the agents get good enough. Here are your wallets. Just figure out how talks amongst yourselves.
As long as you have an endpoint where you know that you're talking to this thing. And that takes us back to crypto, actually. I think one of the somewhat unfortunate points of how the internet is architected, it's actually very hard to talk to a service without upfront having a human involved, right? You need to somehow permission an API key. And then there's like systems which have this sort of programmatic provision of that. But again, it assumes that someone has integrated that on the software level. The cool thing about crypto is if I have a private key, I can start signing messages, I can start signing transactions, right? And I can use that as a means to identify, let's say, an agent, right? Okay, you can build more complex identity around this, but this is like the basic primitive. The agent with that wallet can start engaging with others and can send a message and can send a transaction, move value around. And so maybe that's all we need. Maybe that's all we need. And the rest is more like a soup, right? Historically, multi-agent system research, I thought you need this very well-defined like agent communication protocols with like performatives and like exact finite state machine of how everything works. But I feel like now that the models and the capabilities of these AI models are so good, you can find out on the fly whether the communication is still ongoing. Like we don't have any sort of agent communication app protocol we're currently following. Like we just take cues from each other and then you say something, I say something, and then we're like, okay, the podcast is done. We didn't have to upfront specify exactly how we go through this podcast, right?
Yeah. Amazing. And like the protocol can be differential personalization of product in the sense that for like mundane use cases, for example, a podcast, you just engage. Maybe you have a brief introduction about, okay, what is this going to be about? Like, what is our focus? But then like maybe for high stakes use case, if you are like a trading agent delegating like your portfolio management to another agent, then you may want to like negotiate like some hard rules and also some security rules of some actions that need to be verified. And that can be done in the agent to agent way, right? It doesn't need to be a standard that like everyone abides to. Yeah. So I think this is like something that we haven't thought about before when actually like the software can actually negotiate and make a commitment.
I love that. David, this podcast is high stakes for me, but I take your point. It's an excellent framework. Guys, it's a great hopeful note to end on. All kidding aside, really enjoyed the conversation. Both your projects are fascinating. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for having us.
Well, there you have it. Thanks again to David Crapis, the co-founder of Pin AI, and David Minarsch, co-founder of Valory. And thank you to my partner, Vana, for making this pod possible. Not surprisingly, Vana is also deeply immersed in the world of decentralized AI agents, as ultimately, these agents will need data. And Vana is creating an ecosystem that enables and empowers self-sovereign user-owned data. Exhibit A, Vana's recent partnership with Eliza, one of the most exciting AI agent projects. More on that soon. And thank you to you, dear listeners. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to the People's AI on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And can you do us a favor? We are new, we are growing, we are scaling. It would help enormously to spread the word. If you enjoyed this episode, you found value out of it, please give it a share on X or the social media channel of your choice, or just ask your AI agent to do that for you. Thanks again. See you next time.